country, so my parents were never overtly religious. In fact, I think Dad still classifies himself as an atheist. So I decided to explore various religions or dominations of Christianity. I was a Hare Krishna for about a week, I think, and I didn't find anywhere that sort of fitted. I don't know what I was really looking for, but nothing really gelled with me. Then late 80s, I've got to think back, it's before I moved to Australia. There's a correspondence course that I started with a group in the South Island. I was living in the North Island of New Zealand, and it was to do with witchcraft. I think it was more of a curiosity as to what this witchcraft was all about. But then I moved to Australia in 1990, did some Celtic studies, and it's almost something out of a Hollywood movie. I went for a walk around my neighborhood one day, and there was this shop, and in the window it had a sign saying course in ceremonial magic. And I didn't really understand what ceremonial magic was all about, so I just went inside this funny little shop. It sold a lot of incenses, handed over my money to join up in this course on ceremonial magic, which was like a domino effect. From the course, went into learning about the Kabbalah and got initiated into a coven. And that was probably about in the early 90s. Then I went to England, danced around a few stone circles, met another coven, got involved with them for a little while, and then they offered me an opportunity to be initiated into their group. And I think I ran away. I was a bit scared and ended up on the Isle of Skye and danced around a few more circles there before I came back to Australia. So that was my first introduction, and it's been a journey of discovery, largely personally. And yeah, it's something that I've never really looked back on in any form of regret, because it's just sort of gives you a different opportunity or lens to look through the world in. And it's just all encompassing into everything that I do these days. So I don't see it separate to my normal life. It is incorporated in everything that I do these days. So the Temple of the Dark Moon I actually founded. So it's my construction right from the word go, from the get-go. I founded that in 1999, I think, if I can remember correctly. It was either 98 or 99. Been through a number of versions and reconstructions over the years. And it's basically was centering around three of my main interests, which include Alexandrian witchcraft, which I was initiated into, ceremonial high magic, which I always have a passion with because that was my very first sort of magical experience, and more traditional craft, so non-Alexandrian, non-Gardnerian sort of craft. So there's sort of like a massage of all those three main lines together. So as I said, I founded it in 1999. These days, it's sort of gone to a little bit of a hiatus as I've sort of found other interests in being focusing on my writing and also doing a lot of sort of self-exploration in other topics that I've been interested in. But when it was fully active, like with most covens, pretty small group, we would actually meet weekly, have a outer court or a training circle and an inner court for initiates. We would do our rites. We're also running full moon or public full moon gatherings for the local people here in Adelaide, and did that for about 10 years. Have the odd camp every now and then up in the Adelaide Hills where we, especially the winter ones, when we would reenact the wild hunt. That was probably one of my more favourite memories of those camps. But I suppose over time, some of the initiates got a little bit older, having families and children. And again, their interests have changed as well, or the sort of the priorities in their life. So coming to a bit of a hiatus now, but I'm hoping maybe next year, sort of seeing what the climate is. COVID has sort of added a little extra layer of uncertainty to social gatherings. And I suppose the whole witchcraft scene, especially here in Australia, has changed. I don't know if it's changed anywhere else in the world, but it's very gone online a lot. But I've been involved with the craft now for 30 years, and we've seen people, especially when it comes to more traditional styles of witchcraft, be interested and they go away and they come back and they go away. So it's something that's always sort of been there in the background, and people will go off and do their own thing and then sometimes come back because they feel that there's something missing. And these days, so the witchcraft has changed a lot. So while the temples, when it comes to membership, has sort of ebbed and flowed, the basic structure and the teaching style and the seriousness of the teaching styles, I guess you can call them, the foundational work, has by and largely stayed the same. And who knows what will happen in the new year, and if people are wanting to come back to a more traditional style of witchcraft, the temple will be there waiting to see if anybody's interested in initiation again. Many moons ago, many moons ago, I was attending a pagan fest in New Zealand where I was one of the guest presenters. The other guest presenter was Philip Cargom, I think he's ex-arch-druid these days. And he suggested to me, I think he just put out Druid Craft at that stage. And he suggested to me that every day, if you want to be a successful writer, write at least a couple of hours every single day. So I still write. I write actually quite a lot. Largely it's rewriting notes that I've written a couple of weeks before. I have notebooks all over the place. It's pretty ridiculous because I can never find anything. I'm always reading, as you can see my little book collection behind me, taking notes from that. I watch a lot of, especially these days with a lot of online conferences, and making notes from there. So I'm basically writing every single day for, yes, as Philip said, at least an hour or so of things that interest me. And sometimes I would just sit out in my garden and see if I can pen some poetry or anything that's inspiring to me, but forever keeping up that sort of discipline, I suppose you could say, but a bit old school in the writing. Whether it gets published, I don't know. Maybe one day they'll find some memoir or something in my notebooks that might be worthwhile publishing. But I'm forever writing, and I actually enjoy it. Something about pens and new notebooks. One of these weird people who I go down to our local stationers, I get very excited when someone's got a new pen. I'm going to be biased. My Encounter with the Dark Goddess is probably my favourite. It's the one that I'm very passionate about. I'm forever coming back to it, even on my little YouTube channel, talking about it. It's one when someone invites me to talk, what do you want to talk about? It's either that topic or the goddesses who fall into that category, or something to do with the dark goddess, largely because it's something, not only is the book sort of merged out of 10 plus years of running workshops, but it's a subject matter that's so vastly different depending on how people interpret it. But there's so many facets in it. I grew up with a love of mythology, so I love the myths of the gods and goddesses. I also came through the craft in an era where it was almost becoming whitewashed back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So anything that was dark and scary was sort of, avoided. But the people that I was doing magic with at the time were sort of like venturing into the shadows. So it's sort of a rebellious streak there. And it was interesting to find through the stories, and because the form of witchcraft that I follow is religious, or we're connecting with deity, we believe in the other. So these are more than just stories that we're listening or reading or connecting with. These are actually beings that sort of have manifested, or their energies have sort of turned into an egregore that we can connect into, because we're reliving their, or making their stories become alive again. So we're feeding that back into their own sort of essence, and they're coming through and connecting with us. And everybody's picking up different aspects of, whether, say with Hecate, for example, her following has sort of exploded over the last 5, 10, 15 years, through a lot of people reconnecting back with her because there's been a need. The same with other goddesses too, the sort of resurgence of, we call them dark, but they're not really dark as a negative. They're dark in the fact that we've suppressed a lot of things in our society, and they bring that up to the forefront. It's almost like sort of lancing the boil, and they make us uncomfortable. And we've seen this through COVID, that when we sit in the uncomfortable stuff, when we actually embody the feelings that we've suppressed or we've been told by society that we shouldn't be doing, when we allow these things to sort of rise up, that they can actually, it's almost like pseudo psychology, assist us in sort of like clearing blockages and getting clearer understanding of life and our placement in the whole greater scheme of things, which I suppose is what every or majority of spiritual and religious paths are about. So this book, Encountering the Dark Goddess, I see it as just an introduction to get people started to a whole range of exploration, whether you see them just as the stories, but it's like, what can we pull out of those stories? What do they actually mean to us to improve our lives? Or what are they actually telling us of where we've gone off the rails? And one goddess in particular, Morgan Le Fay, is people a little bit curious as to why I've included her. But if you look at her story and how she's evolved over basically from the, I think it's the 8th century or the 10th century, when Geoffrey of Monmouth first wrote about her, to how she's become in the later versions by Thomas de Malroy. She's completely lost her way. And I think in that in itself, a lot of us can actually identify with where our true calling has sort of been suppressed because it doesn't fit in with society. And especially in Western culture, we have a very defined idealism as to how we're supposed to conduct our lives. So yes, these goddesses, and on the back burner is the counterpart of that is about the dark gods, but I find their energy completely different, or I work with them differently. And I think this is the beauty too, when it comes to myths, when it comes to deity, everybody has a different approach. And they appear to people differently. Some people might just see them as archetypes or essences. I see them as living beings. I've been in circles where they've come through, or they've stomped through, in the case of Hecate, demanding why she wasn't included. And it's just like, well, we've just done a ritual for you, 2 weeks ago. This is for other girls, sort of thing. And so we've had a really personal relationship with them. And it's sort of like, I suppose, through the writing, through running workshops, through, even the basics that I have in here to start people connecting with them, you're sort of connecting to another aspect of yourself as well, which is a little bit difficult to explain unless you've actually been there. But this is the whole thing about witchcraft and goddesses and deities, is it's a very personalized experience. But it's to step across that sort of abyss and almost free fall and waiting for someone to catch you, which I find really exciting. Maybe I'm just one of these weird people who just trust in something beyond my own self. Only one. I've got a few books behind me. I'm going to choose a modern writer, in that it's only been the last few years that he's put out a few books, and that's Damien Eccles. Now, he was one of the Westboro 3 back in the 90s who were accused of think it was Satanic Murderers or something like that. And while he was actually on death row in America. But the reason why I've picked him is that since since he was released, the two books that I think he's put out a third book now. Um, I'm going to backtrack because one of my first introductions into magic and witchcraft was through high magic or ceremonial magic. So, and there's a few foundational rituals there that appear in every single magical book, and that's the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the middle pillar. So when I heard that Damien Eccles had put out a book, I was curious to find out what new information he could actually put out or how he could rework this ritual, because it appears in every other book since the Golden Dawn, basically, and if not before. I was actually very surprised and almost delighted with his book on high magic and how he presented the standard ritual that everybody else included. He actually did manage to offer something completely new, someone for me. There was aspects in there that I hadn't even thought about. He had, and also included in it his own personal story of how this ritual, amongst other rituals that he was doing, actually, and he still believes this till this day, saved him when he was on death row from the beatings that he would receive from the guards, etc., etc. And he's sort of almost like, I don't know if you can use the word prophet, a living prophet or a disciple, or an example as to how magic can be used to enhance your life, to get you through difficult situations. And I just admire his other work. He's also done another book on angels and archangels, and he's done a lot of study into Babylonian culture and Sumerians, which is an area of interest of mine as well. So that's really interesting as well. And it's sort of like expanding, so it's the knowledge base, because while he was on death row, he actually had was able to get in a lot of books and do a lot of study, and had people actually supporting him through not only just magic and witchcraft, but also a whole lot of esoteric and other spiritual teachings. So he's sort of like blended a lot of these together, and it's coming out with similar principles, which is enhancing his writing and also what he's sharing through his books, which I'm finding really, really interesting. So I would probably put down Damien Eccles, especially for a recent author, as someone that I'm finding extremely interesting and someone that I would, admire. And if I ever get the opportunity to listen to him live or, attend a workshop, I would be absolutely delighted. I would say the same thing too. But then I decided I'll go onto the Australian Census website. We've recently had a census, and just see, I think it was 2021, just to see what the figures were. And they actually compared that to the previous census, which was 2016. And in the 2016 census, they actually included Wicca witchcraft as a title under all the Christian religions and the atheists and the Gnostics and all the other Orthodox religions. And in the 2016 census, there were some 27 odd thousand people in Australia who identified themselves as pagan, and some 6,500 plus who specifically identified themselves as Wicca or witches. And I found that really interesting. Unfortunately, our last census, they got rid of that sort of category, but they did have other spiritual beliefs. And there's an organisation here in Australia called PAN, which stands for Pagan Awareness Network. And they tried to encourage people that if you put other spiritual beliefs, that you actually then denoted that as witchcraft or paganism. So that would actually appear in the census. Whether people did that or not, it's hard to say, because as I said, we've lost that breakdown, which is very disappointing. But what it actually did show was 31,680 people had other spiritual beliefs, and they were defined, though we don't know what they were defined as, and 1,700 people were non-defined. So whether they were all witchcraft or magicians or who knows, but they do say on the census website that our fastest growing religion here is actually Hinduism, but that's because of the immigrants coming in. So I am hoping that the next census, they'll actually include that breakdown when it comes to other religions, like what they did a couple of years ago, because I find it's very interesting, and especially the reach. So if all the 31,000 people from last year are actually, say, pagans or witches, that's quite a good percentage of the population for us in Australia, and a good push to get publications and books down here for us. This is a difficult question because I enjoy both. I do find when I prepare notes to teach, I end up almost writing a mini book. I'm not one of these people. I don't know how to do dot notes. So you can go to some courses, and if there's a handout that's just some notes, when I do a course, they get a mini book because I'm forever writing, because I have this sort of passion with words and language and how things are actually sort of like put down on paper. And I'll actually, instead of doing speaking notes, I will write a whole script out, because I'll sort of massage the words in a particular way to make sure that I get my point across. So I think that's also comes back to my love for writing as well. But I think when it comes to actually face-to-face teaching, to see the change in somebody when they actually get what you're talking about, or if it's even like if they're doing a meditation and they actually reach that place of inner peace under your guidance, or if it's a witchcraft, understanding the wheel of the year, or they get something for the moon, or they just understand the hermetics of magic, and then the penny just drops and you can actually see the clarity coming over them. And you don't often get that through someone reading your books unless they've given you some feedback on that. So, yeah, it's a bit of both. Very hard to answer. Very hard to answer in one go. Both different writing, different teaching styles too, I think. But I think you can learn a lot from books, but especially when it comes to the craft is something that you have to experience, that you have to go through physically. You can't learn the craft just by books. You have to actually get out and do it, and to be in circle with other people. So I used to do full moon gatherings, and even the middle of winter when there would be clouds across the sky and you couldn't see the moon, when we started chanting, and it could even just be an om, but we'd usually do the goddess chant, or there's a few other lunar chants that I'd write. And then the clouds would part and the moon would shine down, almost blessing us. And then right when we're finished, the clouds will come over and it'll start to rain. And it'll be like, oh yes, it's quite magical. I think I'd like to go back, and I don't know about one event, but it could be any event to do with the New Forest Coven, because there's so much. Was Gardner involved in the coven? Did he make up witchcraft all by himself? Who was Daffo? And despite the intensive investigations, I think it was Phil Heselton's put out numerous books on there, everybody still doesn't believe whether Gardner was initiated into a coven or made it up. So I'd like to go back to the 30s or 40s, before the war, I think it was before the war, when Gardner met the New Forest Coven with Edith and Daffo, and actually see what they actually got up to and how that compares to what has come down to today, just because I'm curious about facts. I know which goddess I should invite, because she'll probably splat me around with the cosmic frying pan if I don't include her. But there's another one that I would be more interested in writing. That will be Ishkrigul. I do have a little thing for Ishkrigul from ancient Sumer, largely because I feel she's been very misinterpreted and misunderstood. That could be just me barking for the underdog, but I do feel in the story of the descent of Inanna sort of gets all the praise and the attention, where Ishkrigul, there's really not a lot that has come through to us today, like describing what she looks like or alluding more to her character, apart from the few fragments of the story. So I would really like to get to know her a little bit better. A witch, living or dead, that would have to be Alexander's. But like my connection with Gardner, Alex, I'm initiated into the Alexandrian tradition. So I would be greatly honoured to sit at a table with him, even though he was a showman and a bit of a controversial character. He was also a magician, a witch. He liked to push the boundaries. I think he would be very fascinating to actually meet, especially in this day and age. The Alexandrian tradition still carrying on. Maxine is still with us. It'd be nice to actually listen to Alex and hear some of his stories, since he lived also a very long life. As to a fictional character, I don't know. I'm just thinking, who was the witch out of Wizard of Oz, the green-faced one who was in Wicked? That could be a good idea, because she wasn't too bad, actually. Was it Espet or something like that? I don't really do fictional witches. Or maybe the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus, who stomped around going, "I smell children." Yes. Coming up to that time of the year, so that could be interesting as well. Just write. Doesn't matter if it is something silly, something that you're repeating off the radio or television, or a prose from a book. Just write anything down and get into the habit of writing. Said earlier, Philip Carr-Gorm said to me once, is get into a routine of writing for at least an hour a day, or writing a couple of 100 words a day. Doesn't matter what you are. You could write lines as if you were at school, but get into that habit of writing, and then after a while that will automatically come naturally to you, and it sort of like opens up the, should we say, channels between what happens in the head to the hand, and and you should be able to then move that through to topics and subjects that you're interested in, that you really want to write about. And I think also read a lot as well. You've got to know what you're writing about. So read and write.